How you doing, Bobby?
Good, Ryan. How are you, man?
Good, good. So, thank you very much for coming on the Life After Business podcast.
No problem. Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
I'm excited for today because I think private equity is a world that is very mystical to a lot of our listeners and a lot of people out in the marketplace. And so, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a backdrop on where you came from and how you got into your firm, and then a little bit of an overview of your firm?
Sure. My background and story is probably a bit unique, especially for private equity. So I went to Fordham University in New York City, graduated with a degree in finance, but in the intervening period while I was at school, was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates. I played professional baseball for 6 years. I was fortunate enough to play in the Olympics in 2004, and unfortunately a shoulder injury derailed my career, and was able to meet the founder of MCM Capital, Mark Mansour. I was able to meet him while giving his son hitting lessons, and had a life decision to make, whether or not I was going to have another surgery or I was going to, quote unquote, go into the real world. I obviously ended up at MCM Capital. I think I made the right decision, although watching the Indians last night and a couple of my teammates really makes me question that decision sometimes. But in any case, and MCM Capital has been around since 1992, and principally from 1992 to 1998, we were what some people in our industry refer to as a fundless sponsor. So as we look for investment opportunities, as we look for private companies to buy or management teams to partner with, we really didn't have a source, a direct source for the equity. What we did to buy the companies is, a company would be under letter of intent, and Mark and one of his cohorts would go around Cleveland and to high net worth individuals and ask if they had an interest in investing in this company. So they raised capital and then bought the businesses that way.
And what year did you get involved in the firm?
I was involved I got started in 2008, so I've been doing it now for eight and a half years.
Nice. So from baseball to private equity, man, that like you said, there's not a lot of people that can put that on their resume.
No, it's a little different, and nice segue at times to really put your foot in the door and differentiate yourself. So
put people at ease, man. You're not like walking in a big old 3-piece suit all the time and saying, "Hey, by the way, I went to every single school in the Twin City or the United States."
Right, and I'm not that smart, so they'll figure it out rather quickly.
So before we kind of even get into a little bit more of the history of your firm, so why don't you give our listeners just a super basic backdrop on what private equity is?
Okay. Private equity is really, there's a few different forms that it can take, but generally speaking, it is a liquidation option for a private business owner. So it's a way to diversify his portfolio by selling all or a portion of his business to a private equity fund. So there's different ways that can happen, and maybe we'll go into more specifics later on in the conversation. But generally speaking, private equity is a way for a business owner to get liquidity for his or her business.
And so, with that being said, is the private equity firm, is it just a bunch of people sitting around with a bunch of money, or is it a bunch of suits that are willing to make a bunch of deals? Explain to our listeners exactly what it is that your firm or a firm like yours does and how the whole exchange interaction works.
Yeah, so I can, there's firms that have a lot of different strategies, so I can really only speak to ours in more detail. But we have 8 professionals here. We have what we call deal teams. There's 3 individuals, myself included, who run transactions, which means when we have an investment opportunity, we are the ones in charge of the investment. We're in charge of the equity that goes into to that investment. We're we are all sitting at desks. We're certainly not wearing suits here in Cleveland. We're a little bit more laid back, and most of the time we wear jeans, quite frankly.
Or baseball jerseys.
No baseball jerseys. But we have our limited partners. So where our money comes from, we have limited partners, whether they be endowments, universities, pension funds, high net worth individuals, and our own money. We pool that money together. So people are giving us their money, just like you would a wealth manager, and entrusting us to make the right investment decisions on their behalf. And instead of buying stocks or bonds, we're buying privately held businesses. And our limited partners expect a return on their investment, and that's really incumbent upon our judgment. And most importantly, since we like to focus on partnering with incumbent ownership, is choosing the right management team and the right business to really back and put the money behind.
So how do you find the money that you use in this pool of money?
You can hire a placement agent. So a placement agent is somebody that will have relationships with all these endowments, with what people call fund-to-fund vehicles, with high net worth individuals. And they will go around the country and really tout MCM, look at their track record. This is what they've done. This is the type of investments that they make. And if it fits with that pension fund, if it fits with their strategy, then they might be a fit for MCM. They would come in and meet with us. They would interview us, really do a lot of diligence on us, since typically people are committing anywhere from $1 to $10 million into our fund. And larger private equity funds, some of those check sizes are 100 to 200 million. So people are investing significant dollars into private equity funds, and again, trusting them with a large number.
And I think you hit on a couple interesting things that I think is maybe a little bit more ambiguous for business owners, where your fund, when you're going to the big pension, just for an example, like Chicago Police Department and their pension fund, or like Allianz Insurance or something like that, and you're pooling that all together along with a bunch of other stuff, right?
Yes, exactly.
So then, when you guys are having conversations with those people, because I think it all kind of trickles down, what are the expectations that you give them for returns, for length of their portfolio, how they can liquidate it, and what kind of control that they have versus you have of the money?
Sure. So when you make a commitment to a private equity fund, they generally speaking will lose control over that money. So they're trusting it to us. We have a period of 4 or 5 years, depending on what you negotiate, to deploy that capital. So to make numbers easy, you raise $100 million, you have a $100 million fund. Generally speaking, anywhere from 10 to 12% of that fund will go into one company. And generally speaking, you typically buy between 8 and 10 businesses per fund.
Okay.
So Ryan, I'm sorry, I lost train of thought.
No. I think it's great because just understanding, where the money flows is kind of, in my world, or any business owners know it too, because the banks are giving them checks, right? So who holds the funds holds the power, right? In a very plain English way of putting it. So just understanding, who's giving you the money and why, and what the expectations are, and then how you then deploy it, which I think is an interesting word. So why don't you kind of walk us through a scenario of how you guys, deploy it, or using those funds then in that $100 million fund?
Sure. So typically, it's very similar to buying a house. Generally speaking, for a house, you're going to put, roughly 20% down. Then you're going to borrow the other 80%. You're going to pay it down over 15 or 30 years. And buying a business with a private equity fund is not that different, aside from the amount of equity that we put in. Some private equity funds like to maximize leverage, which means they will take on as much debt as they possibly can to increase their return. So if they're borrowing more money and the company does well, they have less money at risk, but they're still going to generate the same returns. So your IRR is going to increase.
And
right?
So for the listeners I'm just thinking about the common examples that I've heard of in that scenario in the housing market where everybody was putting almost no money down and constantly using or renting or flipping with lots of leverage or lots of debt.
Yes, and which is really the reason why we don't do that. If we had a crystal ball, if everybody had a crystal ball, you would maximize leverage. You would take the largest loan possible and put in as little of your own money as you could. It's just based on a risk profile. But from our perspective, we've been fortunate enough over 24 years to never lose money on any leverage buyout we've ever done. And part of the reason, the largest part is obviously partnering with the right management team, partnering with the right people and right business owners. The second part of that is also not maximizing leverage because we have imperfect information. We live in an imperfect world. So what we like to do is put 50% of the equity in, and then we would borrow, 50% of the purchase price in terms of equity, and then we would borrow the other 50%. So if we were buying a company for $20 million, we would put $10 million of our own money in and then work with our banks to loan us the other $10 million.
And that's if the business owner was wanting to just walk away, correct?
No. There's different capital structures in different situations, but generally speaking, that whether the business owner wants to stay or he or she wants completely out, that structure will hold up. Now, most private equity funds, I would tell you, would be anywhere between that 30 to 35% equity, and they would borrow the rest. And it's also a function, to your point earlier, of where the lending market is, where the financial market is. As banks' risk appetite increases, they're willing to provide more leverage to a specific business or to a specific transaction. And I don't know if your listeners understand or know, but we buy businesses based on multiples of EBITDA. So your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. We ascribe a multiple to that business to determine value.
And those multiples, why don't you kind of give everybody, I think this is a perfect segue into it because I think a lot of people are familiar with multiples. I think the big, huge black box is how people determine them. And there's industry. There's their buddy told them at the golf course what they got for their business. So why don't you kind of walk us through how you guys go about determining what that multiple would be?
Yes, and it's to your point, Ryan. It's always a very tough thing to do because one, you're offering a fair, in your opinion, because it's obviously subjective, a fair value for a particular business. And for most business owners, entrepreneurs, that is his or her baby. So you don't want to offend them by offering something low. You want to pay a fair value for your business. And like you mentioned, it's based on industry. It's based on size of a particular business. Smaller businesses generally command a smaller multiple because it's much more risky. Larger businesses tend to command a higher multiple. Businesses that are serving the aerospace and defense market, businesses that are life science, biopharma, those businesses tend to generate higher multiples. But for what we do, which is your brick and mortar, it's your niche manufacturing and value-added distribution, those businesses, depending on your customer base, is it diverse? Do you have customer concentration? Depending on your gross margin profile, which we use to determine a company's competitive advantage or their competitive position. All those factors play in, and generally speaking, with manufacturing distribution, companies anywhere from 2 to 8 million of EBITDA will trade from somewhere around 5 to 8 times would be a good number.
Kind of the rule of thumb, as they like to call it.
Yeah. And there's going to be times where the market's overheated. I would not tell a business owner if he or she is not ready to try to time the market. It's the same thing that you wouldn't, that you would do if you're, looking at stocks. You don't want to time the market. You want to exit your business when you are ready. And I think that's the most important thing. Exit the business when you're ready for a fair value. And most importantly, if you are going to stay with the business, really understand who your partner is.
So I think, you hit on a huge piece of crucial information right there, which is when you're ready, right? And I think there's this like, when are you ready? And what can you, because my dad and I experienced, which is we were burnt out, therefore we were ready, which means you got a lot of stuff that you haven't done properly, right? So there's this kind of sweet spot where you can start doing certain things. So I think I want to start with asking a question, which is, why do you see deals fall apart? So you said all those factors relay into a higher multiple, but like, how many deals do you guys see a year, and what are the things that are happening that you just can't absorb for the risk, or that results in a failure of a deal?
Yeah, so it's a great question. How many deals do we see here? Well, we typically see between 400 to 500 deals a year. So businesses that come across our desk. Now, the ones that actually fit within our criteria of $2 to $8 million of EBITDA and $15 to $75 million in annual revenue, and our manufacturing and distribution businesses, that number then would get dwindled down probably to about 225. We go down the path, we become interested in roughly 5 to 10% of those. So we'd be looking hard at maybe 10 to 20 companies a year, and for one reason or another, maybe it's valuation expectations, we don't get to the letter of intent stage. When we get to the letter of intent stage, goes from 225 down to 20 to probably about 4 businesses a year, and we close 2 of them.
Okay, so that's a lot of work to get those 2 deals.
It's certainly a lot of work to get those 2 deals, which is why it's very important to develop a relationship with the business owner, entrepreneur, really understand his or her goals, what they're trying to accomplish, and if us as a private equity firm, if we can be value added to them, from that perspective, if they're willing to stay on, if they want to retire, that's a completely different scenario.
So what are the going from 10 to 20 deals down to 2? What are the things that stick out? What are the skeletons in the closet? What are the major red flags that you guys are coming across that push them into the not interested category?
Yeah, first and foremost, usually a lot of times it's purchase price. That's something that you have to get past, and what we don't like to do is a retrade. If we bid a number or we present a number to the business owner, entrepreneur, we would like to stand by that number. Now, sometimes things happen during diligence where the numbers aren't what they were represented in. Obviously you have to take a look and really reevaluate your offer. But purchase price is number one. Second is a lot of times it's cold feet. Some business owners or entrepreneurs, after going through this process, realize that maybe they weren't truly ready to sell. What are they going to do post-acquisition when they've been involved, in working so hard in their business for 20, 25, 30 years? And now they have to go home to their spouse, and then they just sit there and twiddle their thumbs. They don't know what to do. That's certainly an issue. When we get down that far, other times it's us, really looking at the business. Can we pay that number for it, and where can we take the business? Most importantly, where can we take the business? Because as we discussed at the beginning of the call, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our limited partners. We have to provide a return. So, the historical numbers are exactly that, historical. We're not buying the past. What we're buying is the future. And can we generate a great return, invest in the business, buy new equipment, invest in sales and marketing, operationally, new commercial development? Can we do these things to really increase the value of this particular business?
I think that's a very interesting comment because from my experience, from people I know, when the business owner's getting when it's, I always relate it back to, remember that like the last week of school and you're just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's when finals are. And I know that sounds just like a super elementary analogy, but it's the mindset and the business owners that I've experienced and worked with where they don't realize that someone else can take this. They've got bigger pockets, they got more resources, and what will that do for them? So really having to get your mindset into their world to actually show you that. I mean, do you see a lot of business owners that are showing you that, or do you have to go in and figure that out for yourselves?
I would say it's a combination of both, Ryan. Some business owners have a clear idea of where they would like to take the business, but the problem is they feel like they're hamstrung. They've taken so much risk over so many years, and they've really increased the value of their business. Do they want to sign their, the dotted line again, personally guaranteeing something, whether it's a new piece of equipment, whether it's investing in new commercial development for a new product, hiring a VP of sales, a CFO, an operations manager, making those HR investments, or do they want to continue to wear the same hat because they know the job's going to get done right? So in our world, we see a lot of the business owners have the idea, they're just done taking that risk. Yeah. Now on the other side is a lot of times a business becomes of size where it really outgrows them and they don't know what to do. And they feel like if they don't get help soon, bring on a partner or sell it, they may lose that value as well because the business just has become so large that they might not be able to handle it.
So we've kind of got a spectrum of personalities within the owners, and I think it's a good representation of the people that are out there where you've got the guy that wants help and has a clear idea, then you've got the guy that's just done, and then there's the guy that just knows that he needs to take it somewhere else but doesn't know where. So I think in my mind, though, that kind of represents the spectrum of financing too and how the deal is structured. Can you kind of give the different ends of the spectrum of how you're dealing with those different situations?
Yes. So for the person that is done, they want to roll up their sleeves and be finished. In those situations, you structure something and it's 100% buyout. You're in the private equity world, you need to have either a really good number two that's already in place at the business, or you need to have a CEO within your network that that you can go ahead and bring into the business, and culturally it will align. He'll get along with the employees and he'll really drive growth. So generally speaking, from a private equity standpoint, when somebody wants 100% out, it's a little bit tougher situation for us. We'll capitalize the structure accordingly, but what we like, especially at MCM, is something called a leverage recapitalization, where the business owner is anywhere from, pick a number, 50 to 65, but still has a lot of gas in the tank. He or she loves what they are doing, but again, they have this risk profile. They've built up a significant value in their business, and they'd like to take some chips off the table, monetize some of that. So we would buy anywhere from 60 to 70% to 80, whatever the number is. From a private equity standpoint, that number, 60, 70, 80, 90%, we just need to know that business owner is going to continue to be engaged. So you brought up a point earlier about, being, the end of school and the finals and done. Well, you talked about giving a business owner $20 million, and do they really want to still run as hard as they did before? Some have that competitive spirit. I know you and your dad would, compete against each other and continue to run as hard because that's the way you're wired. Some business owners, entrepreneurs, they're done. So we call it, something that I don't want to repeat here. but
We'll maybe put it in the show notes.
Yeah. It's called FU money. When somebody gets FU money, and all of a sudden, if things don't go according to Hoyle, they just don't want to run as hard, and you can't blame somebody for doing that. But what we like to do is have all of our interests aligned. So whatever meaningful number, if we're buying 60% of the business and they're getting, whatever the number is, say it's $10 million for 60% of the business. When you look at that $10 million of their net worth, of their plans, what number would they like to reinvest into the business on a go-forward basis? We have to look at that business owner and say, yes, that's meaningful to him, or ask that business owner. You kind of get a pretty good idea. If he's getting a check for $10 million and he wants to invest $500,000 back into the business, you kind of have a feeling where they're about done.
Yep.
But if they want to invest $2.5-3 million back into the transaction, you have some of those. It's a lot of money and meaningful dollars that you're going to get that person's 100%.
So I think that brings up to mind for me the analogy that everybody brings up, which is 2 bites of the apple. So you want to kind of crystallize what that means?
Yes. So it's an opportunity for a business owner in a leverage recapitalization situation where they can take some chips off the table. So you're taking, as the last example, you're taking that $10 million off the table. You're reinvesting $2.5 million into that business on day one. 5 years later, say that gets you 25%. Of the business going forward. 5 years later, we continue to grow that business, and instead of $10 million, now you're getting a check for $40 million. The business is worth $40 million, so now you're getting 25% of that $40 million bucks.
So you're getting another $10 million bucks. That's a pretty good return.
And sometimes it happens like that. It doesn't always happen like that. And I don't know if this is too much detail, but a structure that we use is generally not that. If a business owner really wants to stay involved in a business going forward, it's generally not that $10 million, that $2.5 million reinvest. What we like to see in a structure that we do is if we paid somebody $10 million and we wanted them to retain 30 or 40% of the business, we would write they would get 30 or 40% of the common stock for $30,000 or $40,000. Now, the difference being is if somebody offered $15 million for a business, we would and required them to reinvest $5 million, so their net is 10.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? You following so far?
Yep.
If their net is 10, we would invest, or we would offer $12 million for that same business, and we would ask them to reinvest $40,000 to get 40% of the business. And the reason we do that structure is one, what we like to do again is have everybody's interests aligned. So that business owner didn't do it by themselves. They had a team of folks that helped grow that business. And again, we all like to be rowing in the same direction, have everybody on the boat, and headed towards one goal. So what that allows somebody to do is those key executive managers, those VP of sales, CFO, chief operations officer, whomever the business owner deems very appropriate, it provides us a chance to give them some equity. So we typically set aside 8 to 12% of the equity for that key executive group. And now giving a VP of sales 2% of the business, he only has to write a check for $2,000 versus getting 2% of the business, having to write a check for, I don't know, call it $200,000. Yep. Generally, they don't have that kind of money in the bank to be able to write that check going forward. So it's a way for one, us to really provide some liquidity for the business owner and have a significant equity ownership or upside second bite of the apple going forward for a small a nominal amount, and then also provide a way for the key executive team to get some equity as well.
I love it. It's all like the big old Rubik's Cube of money and interests, and getting everybody on the same page is just totally key.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And then we put together, if somebody doesn't have it or a business owner doesn't have an incentive-based comp plan, we instill that as well. We will never take something away when we get involved in the business. We would only increment. You can't go into a business as a new owner and say, oh yeah, but by the way, that extra $1,000 a month that you were getting for as a bonus, no, we're taking that away. That certainly doesn't bode well for employee morale. So if something isn't implemented into the business, we would instill an incentive-based comp plan. On top of that, key executive comp, where the CEO gets a bonus, that person sweeping the shop floor gets a bonus. If the person sweeping the shop floor does not get a bonus, neither does the CEO.
I like it. I like it a lot. It's commissions and incentives drive behavior.
Yeah. Show me how I'm incented, and I'll show you how I'll act.
Right. So now that we're kind of discussing behavior, what are some of the challenges you've seen? I mean, I don't like to work for other people. I know that. I'm speaking on my own behalf. How do the owners and the key managers, how do you integrate the cultures and the management teams? Because I'm not speaking on your behalf, but a lot of buyers that I've talked to, it's the culture fit. It's, can this guy work for us? I mean, the whole financial model might work together, but how do you deal with the people factor?
Yeah, man, Ryan, you hit the nail on the head. Culture is extremely important. So if I were to talk to business owners, first thing I would ask them is, do you get along with this private equity fund? Because at the end of the day, if you're staying on, it is a marriage. It is absolutely a marriage. And to your point, some people cannot work for anybody else. When we get involved with a business, yes, you will have a boss, maybe for some people the first time in their life, others for the first time in a really long time. But how we interact is we do not micromanage. We are more hands-off. We look at a business as a stew. The management is the meat and potatoes, and we are the salt and pepper. So we add value where we can. We do not micromanage. We do not make HR decisions for the CEO. He or she will win or lose with their own management team. Now, they will be held accountable. If the business is not performing, there has to be a change made. But if the business is performing, generally speaking, you're not going to see a CEO get fired. Some private equity funds alternatively like to really be hands-on.
Rip and replace, I've heard. I mean, there's a lot of horror stories out there that you've heard.
Yes, there's certainly some that do that, and that's why I would really stress and really understand, the private equity fund that you're partnering with, who they are as people, get to know them. Do they have families? Do they have kids? How talk to prior CEOs. That they've partnered with before in the past. Some will say, yes, we do leverage recapitalizations all the time with incumbent ownership. And then, if you ask them to speak to some of their CEOs, well, every single one of them is replaced. And that will give you a very good idea. Now, in some cases, the CEO says, I'm going to give you 2 years and I'm done. But you can still talk to the private equity fund to say, that the business owner that you bought the business from, and the current CEO, would you mind if I spoke with them? And if a private equity fund is worth their salt and they're good people and they've believe in what they've done and helped add value to a business, you'd be happy to give them that contact information.
Well, and I think for our listeners too, it's a really refreshing strategy coming from your. I mean, you guys are true partners, and I just a little bit of a side note is. There's a lot of horror stories out there, but it's a lot of the, like I said, the rip and replace. But, if you think about as a business owner, I mean, you're still leveraged by your bank. Your bank still could pull your note. And I've been on the sides of those conversations where, so you still technically have a boss, right? And even people that have AR financing where they've got an asset-based lender who's collecting for them, that's even possibly more of a boss than in your situation where we never knew that the private equity world really existed. I mean, we did. We had some exposure to it. It was not great. But what if we would have found a partner? It's like, holy cow, someone with bigger pockets that actually can accomplish my dreams. It allows that person to expand their horizon and not just, go get a check from a bank, because in essence, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and it's to help you. So, we're more involved or at least we would hope we're more involved than a bank, from the standpoint that we want to help, grow the business. Obviously, we've invested a lot of our money from our LP base and ours own personally into this business, and we want to see it succeed. There's a lot of business owners that may not be able to handle, like we said, having a partner, but really understanding who they are, how they're going to act is vitally important.
Well, then I think you had mentioned that your niche is manufacturing and finding the right partner in the right industry too. Because I mentioned that I don't ever like bosses, but if I would have had the opportunity that someone could have slingshotted me into the industry and made the right contacts, you all sell more together, and then that's more of a team. So technically, you don't quote unquote have a boss; you'd have a partner.
Yes, and that's the way that we look at it. Now. Ultimately, is it our decision, to again hire or fire the CEO? Yes, but we really, really view our transactions as a partnership with incumbent management, and our success. We realized long ago, and I said it at the beginning, is that we're not that smart. We did not build that business from the ground up. We did not run it for the last 20 to 25 years. So what makes us think, after doing 75 days of due diligence and maybe owning a few other portfolio companies, that we would know how to run it better than he or she did for the last 20 years? Now, because we're exposed to so many different companies, that a lot of companies share the same growing pains and issues, and can we bring things to the table? Absolutely. But I'm not pretending to be an engineer. I'm not pretending to be a sales and a VP of sales and marketing. I'm not pretending to be the CEO. It's more from a board level, and really trusting that person to run the business.
Which I think, just to put an exclamation point on this, is the key management team and the number two. If a person wants to kind of walk away a little bit more, a little sooner than they wanted to, having that key management, because that'll be the glue that interlocks you guys. Yes,
and if you think 4 or 5 years down the road, you have to, when you're working with take the old adage, you always want to hire people smarter than you. At some point you're going to be done, and you want to see that organization continue to thrive. So grooming a number two is not just a good idea for the business owner now, but it's a good idea for the business owner after they partner with a private equity fund, because most of the time that business owner, they're getting that second bite of the apple. We've had a few business owners who are younger at 50, and they've gotten 2, 3, and 4 bites at the apple.
They're nice and full.
Yes, but generally speaking, it's going to be that one bite of the apple. And you really want to make sure, again, who you partner with is key.
So to leave our listeners with, one bit of advice or something we haven't covered, what would it be?
Man, it's a very good question. Really understand what your business is worth. Take emotions aside. Take conversations that you have with others that have sold their business before in context, and really do your diligence up front. For most owners, entrepreneurs, this is a once in a lifetime event. You do not want to have regrets. I know, money on paper, somebody's looking at your business. Well, this person offered me $25 million for my business. Well, this person offered me $20 million. I'm going with 25. Now, that $25 million experience may not be the best of choices. Really understand who that partner is. If you're going to sail off into the sunset, God bless you. Take the money and run. But if you're really serious about staying with the business, diversifying your risk, getting that second bite of the apple, really understand who your partner is. And all those questions should be addressed before the transaction happens. Before people want to say before you become pregnant. Do not go so far down the path that you feel that you can't pull yourself out. And at the end of the day, if you do feel that way, you can always say no. You can pull back. Don't feel like you've gone too far down that path. And we've spent a couple $100,000 on all this, and we're really close. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. This is a once in a lifetime event in your life. Make it right and have no regrets.
Absolutely fantastic advice, Bobby. Where can our listeners get a hold of you?
At Bobby@MCMCapital.com. So it's BOBBY at MCMCapital.com.
Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem.